Welcome to the Forank Marketing Podcast, where we discuss everything about marketing, SEO, and PPC. Enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Forank Marketing Podcast. My name's Leigh. I am the one half of Forank, and I am the PPC lead at Forank, and I'm here welcomed by Zoe. Hi Zoe.
Hi everyone.
How's your, let's have a bit of a catch up. How's your week, month been since we last spoke?
Yeah, it's been good. I think I've spoke about this office that we've been renovating for the last couple of episodes at least. I'm finally in when recording my first episode in that office. It's as good as done, except there is a radiator to go on the wall and a few other tiny little bits. But yeah, it's lovely to be in a proper dedicated space. And we've got a desk for Leigh here so we can work together again soon. I've got to buy you a chair. But I'll have to come out of next month's budget probably. Yeah, I'm trying to have it on the furniture this month.
I'll be happy to sit on anything, mate. You know me. I'm so looking forward to that.
Well, I was thinking we don't have any comfy low down chairs. I suppose we could get one off the dining room table actually. But no, we'll get you a chair. We'll get you a chair. In a couple more weeks, I can get you a chair.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back in person in a good environment.
It is. It changes things, doesn't it? I've just been working. I told you back at Clear for a little bit, and just that change in having people around you working makes you more motivated to work. Yeah.
I think so.
I used to find myself going to Starbucks, and just because there's people around me, it makes me feel like I should work harder. I don't know, it's weird. It's some weird psychological stuff. I don't know.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I do feel I would work from home for years now, but I've always worked at home with Stu, haven't I? As Stu's my husband now. I mean, there had always been two of us working together, and I think it helped a lot. I don't know if I would be able to do it if I were working at home alone all the time.
No, it's difficult. I found myself finding it really difficult, actually. But I'm glad for the break. I'm glad for the office. I can't wait to join. One day we'll have a podcast corner, I'm sure. Yeah. I've got a completely messy background at the moment than usual. Probably better for the sound, and our sound engineer, Mark, will appreciate this. But I'm also waiting for my bedroom furniture to be installed. So office come wardrobe.
Lovely. Soft furnishing to doesn't it soften sound?
Yeah, what did Mark say? He said the best recordings can be done in a closet or a wardrobe, just all have loads of toys, stuffed toys or whatever around you.
Yeah.
How's work been?
Yeah, good. Nice and busy. But if you're aware, I think busy, but lots of good stuff going on. But actually, I said which is almost a little bit connected to what we're talking about today. So we're talking about cracking the code on B2B attribution, which Leigh is very, very good at. And I'm not brilliantly strong at this. I can do a little bit, but I rely on you a lot for this topic. But I was writing an article recently on URL parameters. You can probably dig into that whole can't we? But there's you might as well just push on with this, I think. There's a good stat here. I'm interested to hear what you think about this stat. So it says that 59% of marketers indicate that creating a culture of measurement and accuracy is the biggest attribution challenge. And I'll be honest, I was surprised that it was just 59%. What did you think?
I thought it would be higher.
Way higher.
I did. And I think whenever you talk to people and I guess it gets it's a very large topic, this, because when you talk to people and if they are like myself, I don't know, more heavily on Google Ads has their own attribution model. So you would then rely on that. So I think it all depends on what the priorities are within the company. But if you looked actually at it as a whole, as a marketing as a whole, I'm surprised that number's not higher, but I think it is the way it is because of what people see as their single source of truth, perhaps.
Yeah, I wonder about if I wouldn't have known the degree of nuance you can get in attribution if it wasn't for working with you, I think. Because I would just probably rely on just what's in analytics. I wouldn't have really known about parameters. I wouldn't know you're really good at looking at dream data. And I just wonder how many people, to me, the stat feels so low when attribution is such an effort, isn't it, to do it well across the company. I just felt like it would be a lot higher. So it makes me wonder if there's a lot of people that in a bit like me, really, perhaps don't fully appreciate the granularity you can get with it if done correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And for listeners who may not know what attribution is or what we're going to be talking about, I'll give you a preface of this. So there's two things that we consider with attribution, and attribution is the time it takes for someone to convert. So, and what channel the conversion gets attributed to. So when we talk about channel, we talk about obviously marketing channels, and that can be anything from organic, paid, it could be referrals, whatever that looks like is your channel. Now, it all depends which channel gets given that conversion when someone converts. So there's the first thing, and that becomes tricky because there are so many different things. And as marketers, you'll know that someone could touch the brand 10 times before converting. So how do you accurately attribute a conversion just to one source? Then the other thing we have to consider is attribution windows as well. So this is where it gets really tricky in the fact that Google Ads has a default attribution window of 30 days. So if someone sees an ad of mine and interacts with it, let's say a search ad, they interact with the search ad, and 29 days later, they come to the website via organic, Google Ads is going to pinch some of that attribution when in actual fact, it's organic that led to that conversion. But we do have to attribute it slightly to both. But then I'll get into this in more detail as well, but that's kind of why this becomes a real issue in understanding where budget needs to be spent, what's working, and why it's really important to look at that bigger window when you're talking about marketing. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors that go into this. And I think today we'll be discussing some of the things that happen, how I find it easier to try and attribute it and paint that picture for the client. I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure the client understands. So yeah, that's what we'll be getting into. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it does make sense so far. Yeah, it all makes total sense. I think anyone listening from like the SEO side as well, I do think SEO gets caught in this real weird pinch of attribution as well. The example you used there where like app might procure the click that, and maybe that's from the traffic that SEO got on the website in the first place. But it kind of, to me, and I struggle with it a little bit, I'm quite conscientious. It works the other way for SEO as well, and that metrics get really inflated because organic traffic is kind of like a catch-all, where like all the marketing that maybe preceded them finally going in, searching the brand name and buying, organic often sweeps up a lot of that attribution. Ultimately, up to me, it's all fine as long as the graphs are moving up in the right direction. You overall is getting better, and marketing will work together, doesn't it? But yeah, it is tricky. So it'd be interesting to dig into this a little bit and talk about, well, hear from you, Leigh, on like how best to do it. Whether is there a rule? I guess not, because different companies have objectives and stuff. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to touch back actually on what you said with organic, because I feel like this comes up a lot. Actually, we've got a mutual client that we work on together. Zoe doing the organic, I'm doing the paid media, and it always gets brought up. And what channels have converted, and we report on that, and that's because the client wants that reporting done. So it's kind of funny because we have to report, and when we report, it's so like siloed, like organics this and paid's that. And then actual fact, there is definitely an overlap in what we're reporting on. And then the client will sometimes come back and go, oh, well, we haven't actually seen that many lead forms filled out. I'm like, yeah, because we're both reporting off one different tools, but there is an overlap in that the conversions have been tried to be attributed fairly across both of them. This is something I think Google's getting better at. They now have a different attribution an attribution model called data driven. I'll get into that in a second, but it's very difficult when we have to report like separately on that. And it's just client on this that actually Google Ads may have brought in, or organic may have brought in the first click, and Google Ads retargeting has brought in the conversion, but they've both equally done the same thing. So just getting into then, I'll go over what what we call different attribution models. What they mean, because you would have probably heard some of these, and what we kind of use in what Google Ads uses, what's not what you can't use anymore, but also why it's really important to understand which each of these mean. So I'm going to, for layman's terms, I'm just going to talk about this as just being Zoe's doing the organic, she's doing the heavy lifting, getting the traffic to the site. My retargeting ads are the ones that convert. So different attribution models we have then. So we've got first click or first touch, which means if we were talking about organic and Google Ads here, the attribution would give credit to organic because that is the first time the user interacted with a channel. Last click will be Google Ads because that is the last channel the client interacted with for the conversion. If we were talking, the next one would be linear. Each organic and Google Ads would both get 50-50. Data-driven's a little bit different. It uses past data to calculate the actual contribution of each interaction. So how I see that working is that if someone came to the website twice via organic and once via Google Ads, then the attribution would be split out like that. So we could safely say it'd be like 80-20 maybe. We've got then time decay. Time decay gives credit to the touch point closer to the time of the attribution. So again, it would go to Google Ads because that was where the closest time to this. Multi-touch is an influence of multiple touch points as well. So it would essentially a little bit similar to linear there. It might give equal credit to both. It doesn't say which one, but it'll give more influence to the one that it's touched multiple times. Whew. And then you throw into the mixture here of windows, and each advertising platform has a different window, and this is where it gets then a bit trickier. So, any questions on that, Zoe?
I don't think so. I think that's all. No, that makes sense, and that's clear, isn't it? It's that kind of different types of ways you can manage this data. I think it would be worth just going into the attribution window there. I think that because that's where like different channels. You should explain this because you'll do a better job than me, and I'll confuse it.
Yeah, no, fine. Well, just Google Ads uses predominantly, and it pushes you into this data-driven one, which in theory should be the most fair calculation. It's trying to give, looking at how the user is interacting over multiple platforms or multiple devices, multiple channels, and it's trying to give the credit to where it's due, which is fine. And we work with Google Ads is 30 days. Organic is always going to be at that point that someone clicks through when we look at GA4 and things, but Google Ads is a 30-day window. When we have Meta is set up at 7 days. So if someone converts, even touches Meta, for instance, an ad, converts in 7 days via Google, Meta's going to take that attribution on their platform.
And the ad also, right, on their platform.
Would also take it on their platform. So now we're telling the client we've got 2 conversions. We haven't got 2 conversions, we've got 1, but both channels are attributed, which is why then if we look at GA4, you're then going to see that mismatch, because Facebook is obviously going to just report on, or Meta's going to just report on what they want to report on from them, rightfully so. Google Ads is going to do it from there. We have to look at then GA4, which will combine all the traffic and see what that is. So I think that's where GA4 comes into this a lot when we want to look at this, and you'll hear time and time again the clients going, well, GA4 doesn't match up with Google Ads, and it's never going to be totally correct because, again, you've got these windows of time. So, and it gets really difficult explaining that when you have clients who report on revenue as well, B2C, because you're telling the client you've made them X, Y, and Z in revenue from all these different platforms. So in actual fact, you haven't, and the client isn't going to see that on their end either. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, so you can see how it gets really, really difficult to do. And I think when you're reporting on such different platforms, it's probably best to say use GA4 in this instance, potentially to report on. We have to obviously report on what's going on the platforms itself, but being open and honest with the client to say, look, use GA4 as your source of truth and keep it as that. Use one single source of truth to track your conversions.
Yeah, I think that's the best way, isn't it? And then you can always then like we talk about like the stories that comes from the data, don't we? So you can use your G4 because at least then it's like kind of tidy. As long as you've got decent data in there, you can use one of the attribution types to keep it quite clean. But then you can always feed in stories about how the different marketing efforts have like impacted that end result. So you can then look at your like meta data and say, although we closed here, there wasn't, thank goodness that the ads were there because it was a part of the journey. I do think that's really important, isn't it? Because none of us in any marketing like tactic are closing anyone really without input from other channels and teams. Like it all does weave in together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even GA4, they've got an attribution paths report, which you can have a look at and you can see. And I love showing clients this because what it gives you, it shows you that picture of how many times people actually touch your brand before converting. And it will give you like each of the stages as well. So especially if you've got you've got like maybe a funneled approach with your ads, it's going to show you at each stage like how someone is interacting with your brand. It also shows you the time, like how long it takes them to convert. And this is especially important when we talk about B2B, which tends to be outside of that 30-day attribution window. We look at that and also how many touch points on average. So again, we find that in B2B, that tends to be a lot longer than maybe sort of like B2C, for instance, where it's a little bit more of an impulse buy and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, big concern. I've talked about that on here a few times, haven't we?
Yeah.
And that's another reason, though, why the consideration of the role of all the marketing channels is important, isn't it? Because it does take time, so it's not going to happen overnight. People need to need to know who you are, build trust over time.
Yeah, absolutely. This is again, I'm just going to solely talk about B2B moving forward from this because this is where it gets kind of tricky when you are doing ads, is that when we have that 30-day window and we see, well, actually, the lead to close might be, or even just sorry, the conversion potentially could be outside of that window. That attribution is never going to happen within paid media. There's no platform that's going to say that this has happened via paid media. So what can happen is your cost per acquisition can get really inflated here because essentially you're not converting in that window, even though you might convert later down the line. And you can explain this. You can say, look, we've had this brand awareness and they've converted. And this is why it's very important. And we spoke about this last time on our last episode about marketing and sales, is having that conversation. Because we can see if you've got decent tracking set up in your CRM and all that, you can see when the person came in and how they came in, where they came in from. There are multiple tools out there as well, which are a little bit more advanced than sort of Google GA4 and that paint that sort of picture there. But this is why it's really important with B2B, is that it's not that your ads potentially aren't working. It's just that someone might convert outside of that window. So it is really important to try and sort of paint that bigger picture. And you'll naturally see it as well, like shifts. If you've started ads and you've naturally seen an influx in 3 months' time from leads, and you know your cycle is this, you can pretty much try and paint up that picture as well. So I think people are going to ask what's the best attribution model. It's going to be dependent on the platform you're using. Some Google ads, for instance, only allow last touch and data driven now. They used to allow time decay, which was a really nice one, but they don't do that anymore. I think data driven is close enough. We're going to get to time decay. So yeah, it's going to depend on the platform you're using, but also it depends on your business model. If, for instance, you have a shorter sales cycle, then you could look at a last touch business model. That makes sense. If you've got a sales cycle of, I don't know, 4 days, then you can safely say, well, we'll use last touch there, but definitely for longer sales cycles, use that data driven because you're going to have that cross platform as well. You're going to have device changes and things like that. So data driven is definitely something to look at for there. I will tell you though, how do I word this correctly without slagging anyone off? So there is a danger with people, and this is why I think some marketing agencies get a bad rep, is because there is a danger of overinflating your attribution. For an example, a company that solely does display ads, and for listeners out there, display ads are obviously the ones you see like on native, on websites and things like that. And yeah, you normally get prospected and then retargeted, and they'll follow you around the internet. But the thing with display ads, and I've seen this far too often, is display can report on what we call click through and view through. So a click through makes sense. You had to click through to the ad and then convert, and that conversion will happen. But what you tend, and not everyone does it, but some people do it, they report on view through conversions. So you only have to see a snippet of this ad on the website. You could convert via retargeting later or organic. Display, because you've seen that ad, will attribute it to the display. Even if you were just reading an article and you didn't even interact with the ad, view through conversion just means you have to have seen the ad slightly. Alongside this, they'll also do a very long window for attribution. So again, if I'm just reading reading the Daily Mail, for instance, I haven't even seen the ad, but the ad thinks I've seen it because it's displayed while I was reading. I've then, I don't know, I was researching something, the brand came up, that the same one that was advertising, but I'm still unaware of it. And then I don't know, say this is 29 days later, the display ad will take that attribution, even though I've not even like recognized it was there. And this is why I think some agencies do get a bad rep, because they will overinflate their conversions based on this data.
That's why it's so important, isn't it, though, to have that feedback loop between, if you're hiring someone, you really do want to be sharing what you're seeing your end as well. Like, that's why it should be like a two-way conversation, I think. And, you don't get that enough but because you don't ever really want to rely, I don't think, entirely on what someone's telling you about your attribution. You need to be able to feel at your end as well. And if you can, the discussion needs to be had about how you can close the gap on what's being said and what's happening.
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a power struggle with this at the moment. So I've got a client that I'm working on. We're using an external person to do their display ads. Display ads they're not really like excite me to do them. So we're using an external agency. I'm doing a bit of different stuff with this client, and I'm going to check if they are a B2C client or D2C. And I'm checking in GA4 the performance of these display ads. And again, you have to be mindful, is I'm looking at GA4, but the other people are reporting on their platform. So that their click-through rate is great. The time on the site is fantastic. They're getting these conversions. And I'm there going, GA4 isn't telling me this. GA4 is telling me we've just had a load of irrelevant traffic. No one's spending time on the site longer than 4 seconds. And I've seen no conversions. But again, they're using a 30-day window and they're reporting on view through conversions. So this client they're spending a chunk of this money. I'm like, but it's not true to what you've spent the money on.
Yeah.
Because it's just not like, it's actually what I can see is people signing up. It's your email that are bringing this in, but because that person has potentially seen that ad, you think these display ads are absolutely marvelous, and they're not. I'm wary about people who say their display campaigns and things drive the conversions. Most honest marketers that you'll hear out there say they help with brand awareness, but as a conversion driver, display ads aren't that.
No, I would agree. It's more like impressions, isn't it? And it's naughty, isn't it? But then, if you're hiring someone, you have to be responsible for like checking data makes sense and like having that feedback loop feeding in. Otherwise, it's quite easy to inflate metrics, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And we actually touched on this a little bit with Kyle, didn't we? Where you were talking about key events and conversions and how you could like import all events with key events or something. So you can be like, oh, we've got like thousands of conversions, but if those conversions are just scrolling through the page, that's not a conversion, is there? That's another way where you can inflate your metrics, and that's just not really on.
No, and I think for any maybe business owners or anyone thinking of working with an agency, you can ask these questions and you should ask them, what is the attribution window? Realistically, I feel like if a display, it needs to be 24 hours. If someone doesn't convert after seeing that ad within 24 hours and the ad's not working, I can't rely on a 30-day window because that doesn't give a true value of what other platforms and marketing tools you're doing actually help. So ask them about what the attribution window is. Ask them if it's click through or view through. Ask them what model they're using, because that data is all going to be biased depending on the platform they're using and what they're reporting on.
Yeah, and I feel like as someone like a company or marketing manager hiring someone, I don't really feel like you need the top level or like the top funnel metrics reported to you to some degree. Like as like the manager, you just kind of need to hear the bit that really matter, and not to say that like you don't want to be, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to be like overwhelmed with data that isn't very, very important. Basically, so obviously the display potentially still has an impact, but it's so far away from the sale, you almost don't really need it. Like what's more important is like the bottom funnel, like what's happening, almost like the last touch. Is that right? Or
Yeah. I think, I don't get me wrong, I think you can paint a picture and say, from our brand awareness ads, we can see this natural trend and we've seen pick up at the bottom end. But yeah, if you're telling me that we've reached, I don't know, 1 million people and half of those have clicked through the site, like, yeah, great. Where's the conversions? Like that's what I need to know. If you can say, oh, great, we've reached, your sales have doubled because we've got this, fine, report on it. But like all these vanity metrics don't necessarily need to be reported on sometimes.
yeah, I suppose that's what it is, isn't it? It's like if you're getting vanity metrics and you're not getting the kind of real valuable conversions, then that's a little bit like a bit of a red flag, isn't it? To just maybe challenge and make sure that there is that ROI there.
Actually, you know what? I've just literally written a really interesting article with Search Engine Land, talking about different metrics and why you shouldn't just report on return on ad spend, actually. And not to say that you shouldn't do that, but actually talking about different ways you can report, because a low click-through rate or a low conversion rate doesn't necessarily mean you've got low conversions. What it means is that you've potentially like maybe upped brand awareness a little bit or whatever, or you've introduced YouTube or display ads. So it's quite interesting that. And I think, but again, I think what we said with Kyle is you need to be able to tell the story through the data. There's no point in just slapping everything down and being like, we've got this or we improved on this, because it doesn't actually make sense on the bottom line.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. One thing that so we're kind of touching on this a little bit about how you can be told something like the data, but you cannot be feeling it internally. So something feels off, it's not adding up. How do you get around that, do you think? Because I think sometimes like I think it swings both ways as well, where I've been in situations where I'm like, I wish I could get more information, like to my client to tell me about the quality of leads, for example, and then it goes the other way, in that you can have like people like us reporting too much on these to maybe top funnel metrics and actually incorrect attribution rate attribute, and things aren't really kind of deserving of being attributed, like scrolls instead of conversions, for example. What's the answer to that though? What do people do, and why do you think attribution fails?
I think people aren't honest enough, for one. I think that's why.
Not honest with themselves as well.
Yeah, not honest with themselves. People aren't having those hard conversations. I think we very much get into this thing, and I've done it before, is that the results haven't been good for this month, so I get such anxiety, and especially as I'm spending people's money, I get anxiety. So then I'm always, in my head I'm like, oh, but I could probably get that metric out and that looks good and I'll just only talk about that. But actual fact, it's fine if things aren't working from month to month, and actually if they were, you'd be out of a job anyway. Like, they were working great. So I think just being honest, and I think we're pretty good at being honest. Yeah, mate, you've had a shit month. this has happened, this has happened. As long as you can actually explain why that is, or we've trialed something new and it hasn't worked, that's okay. So having those hard conversations, but going back to that gut feeling, and I think this is what's happening with what I've just mentioned with that third party agency thing I'm kind of working with, is that the client is not feeling it. And you can see that because I'm there like, well, I'm not feeling it either. Like that they're spending a bit of money and then the conversions aren't there, but from the other side, they're saying it, but it comes down to that gut feeling. At the end of the day, if you're the business owner or the marketing manager or the sales manager or whatever that is, and you're not getting those leads, and then you need to be questioning why and what needs to change.
Yeah. We've got a couple of other thoughts about how do you measure what can be tracked and measuring impact of things offline. So that's where like your media mix modeling comes in, isn't it?
Yeah. How to measure things that can't be tracked. I think ultimately it's not the end of the world if it can't be tracked. And you'll find this with what I'm seeing at the moment actually is an uplift of like traditional marketing coming in. I've got loads of these for local restaurants around me. And I've kept this actually because I thought that really struck a chord with me. It was like 15% off for two of us.
I think I kept that. I've got that. That came through my door.
And I thought, you know what? This is the type of thing that you can't track, right? How are we going to track this? I think on here, you have to bring this in or quote it or something, which is fine. That's one way of tracking it. But I think just generally getting that feel, if you're seeing an uptick in conversions and nothing's changed day to day online, what else has happened potentially outside of this? It could be what we see a lot with B2B businesses is that if they've gone to webinars and things, I think they all expect they're going to get loads of conversions on that webinar day or event day or whatever. And I'm always like, no, you won't, because people are so overwhelmed with information that they'll go away, they'll digest it. And what you see is then maybe 15 days later to a month, we see an uptick and nothing's potentially changed and what we're doing. And that has to be a knock-on effect. So I think just generally just having a conversation. If I'm only doing Google ads, I will ask that conversation with clients to say, have you changed anything, or what else are you doing? 9 times out of 10 they'll go, oh yeah, we had this article written, or we did this PR bit. I'm like, oh okay, that makes sense. I mean, and you must find that as well with yourself, Zoe, with organic sometimes.
That it's difficult to track.
Well, not just tracking, but like if you've got I guess in terms of like rankings and things, or if there's PR stuff that's happening and whatever, you probably feel that yourself.
Yeah, you don't always know exactly what kind of responsible for like spikes in keywords or spikes in clicks, especially like brand. We had it recently actually, where I was like, oh my, my clicks for the brand have gone down, and you were saying, yeah, but you'd increase the ad spend, I think, wasn't it? So like there was probably a portion of those clicks were going to ad on that particular month. Yeah, but I mean that happens all the time. Yeah, sometimes like you can get spikes in traffic suddenly, and you think, gosh, that's really odd. And I used to work for like a client who wrote a lot of like editorial style content, and they would capture a lot on like trends, like monthly trends. Every now and again, you'd have a huge spike, and it would be something that's like trending that it's just come kind of out of nowhere. Is that the kind of thing that you meant?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just goes down to, again, just having those conversations when you are meeting with people. I think it's so easy just to like talk about your own platform, but that doesn't help anyone. Like myself and you, we've, like I said, with a mutual client we have, that information that we can share both helps us be better marketers. It helps the client, and we can actually look at the bigger picture and what we do, and we share that information across as well. So yeah, I think just talk. The more information gathering you can get at any client meeting, the better, because somewhere down the line you'll be going, that makes sense as to why this has happened.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to that like gut feel as well, like one thing that I like about a B2B is when you're doing business to business, the businesses kind of understand the hustle as well, and you can actually just ask like really obvious questions. So we've got a meeting soon, haven't we, with a local business, and I don't know how they found us actually. I think it was through Google, but we will ask them, how did you find us? And then when they tell us how they find us, I will ask them, what did you search? If it is Google, which I think it is. But I think like don't be scared to ask those questions as well, because we talk about getting storage and data, that like contributes to the stories, doesn't it? And understanding it on like another level, really. Because it's all right looking at numbers, but yeah, it's nice to be able to ask your lead customers exactly what made them kind of contact you in the end. Because if you know what it is, you can do it again.
Absolutely. This goes actually touches back onto the offline conversions because with
Yes,
B2B,
yeah.
some people will have a telephone or whatever. But I remember when we were working at the agency, Zoe, together, and that was one of the questions we used to have. If we had a lead, it was like, oh, great. How did you find us? What did you search? And it sounds daft asking. The person goes, but they will tell you normally. And then that
Yeah, in B2B, they don't mind.
no, and you can even marry that up to then go, we've got a keyword running on that ad for that, or whatever. But it just then confirms that you're potentially doing something right. Because whilst you can track obviously calls, not everyone tracks like the actual call. People, not everyone has call tracking. So that is really important.
And you can do it in B2B because it's not too weird. The person on the other end of the phone probably gets it, especially if you're like in marketing, because they want to improve their marketing, and we clearly care about our marketing. So if anything for us, I think it goes in our favour.
Yeah, absolutely. It also just back off that local client we're meeting, it was an organic search. I didn't ask I didn't ask her what it exactly was, but it'd be interesting to know.
Oh, it was. Yeah, yeah. I'll definitely ask her.
I have a feeling it was Google My Business, but I was like, oh, I don't know, we'll ask. Amazing. Then I think we should talk about then how to actually we spoke a lot about attribution, but how to accurately measure it, I suppose. I don't think there is ever such a thing as accurately measuring attribution, but how you can do it better.
Yeah.
How you can do it better. I think for me, if you are a small business or just starting out, you haven't got a huge marketing budget or whatever that looks like, I think you can definitely safely use GA4 and use that as your source of truth. You can, I went back to it, but there is attribution path reports that you can do to build that picture. And as long as all your tracking is okay, it's pretty decent. It doesn't have the longevity, it doesn't have the longer cycle. I mean, you can do to change the date range, but I think the maximum it will go up to is like 60 days, potentially. So I think that is the first one. I think a gut feeling as well. What I tend to do is I'm a stickler for writing down everything that I've ever done on an account. And this one helps with reporting, but allows me to cross-reference as well if we're seeing uptick. So I will just have a look around, use your gut feeling. What have you changed? What's impacted? There, if you are seeing a spike in traffic here or a spike in conversions, but you don't know exactly where they've come from. If they've come out of the blue, for instance, oh yeah, we did that webinar 15 days ago. So there's that. Having conversations. I think we talk about this all the time. I feel like I'm a broken record. Talk, talk, talk. I think that would be my three things to do being a smaller business. Anything else to add there, Zoe?
I don't think I'd add anything actually, Leah. I think you've covered it. Like I said, I'm really not the strongest when it comes to attribution. I think attribution is quite difficult in SEO. I could talk a little bit how you can get a bit clever about capturing SEO's effort. I mean, it's always difficult because you've got brand search in there, which is great, obviously, to be ranking on the brand anyway. You should be doing it, but SEO does play a role a little bit. One way, for example, would be people search for brand like discounts before they're about to buy, especially more e-commerce. But you can create pages like discounts, reviews pages to capture that brand search, and then those pages convert really well. And that's just one way to show the benefit of SEO a little bit. Another thing you can do is like look at, I think going back to the kind of multi-touch, looking at the contribution. I think that's the fairest way to do it. I mean, trouble is it gets very complex as well. But looking at how maybe ads is converted on audiences generated by SEO, that's a good way to kind of fold in someone called it like an SEO assist to be on, like an assist, where you supported. But also another way is to look at pages that convert on your website that don't often have brand search, and there won't be many, and you're more likely to find keywords available for that in like e-commerce and like service-based businesses. So if you can find a page, maybe like a service page, it doesn't attract a lot of brands, but also does convert, then you can kind of say, well, if it's organic and they've landed on it and converted using the landing page report, it's almost definitely 100% SEO effort. It's very hard though. I mean, so it's not perfect, is it?
No, it's never going to be perfect. But yeah, I just think as long as you've got that knowledge of what you're working on or what you've changed, I think you can safely, or 90% say, yeah, this has come from X, Y, and Z. The one thing I didn't say was tracking leads. Do you know how many people don't track leads? Even if you're a small business and you've just got a spreadsheet and a Google sheet or whatever it is, track them, the date, what they got in touch by, what it was, keep all that information. That is just then going to help you later down the line when you're like, was the quality of leads good from what we did? Just track it. It amazes me that people don't.
I know, and I think that is a really good way to see some of the offline marketing. We did this with the agency. We did like an annual, do you remember that like annual direct mail campaign? And like we would only do it once a year. And sometimes it would take like 2 years. So 2 cycles of that direct mail campaign to get someone to actually like come in and actually have a visit to via like your offline conversion. But like if you don't keep track of it, we would never really have appreciated that. And it's B2B, so it does take a long time. And sometimes people have tied into contracts for a year in B2B before they can look for someone else to work with. So yeah, if you take the time to document things, and it's really not that difficult if you make process for it, is it? Like even we just do it on Asana. We don't have like loads of leads to manage because we're just two of us working with a few great clients. We don't want to scale ridiculously, but we even keep track of touch points because why would you not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is great. And actually, this obviously what we've just talked about relates to all businesses. That you can start there. I think if you have a lot more money, there are attribution tools out there. I don't know if I should name drop this one. Oh, I love them. They just make my life easier.
Why would you not name drop it?
No, because I want them to sponsor this. No, I'm joking.
Oh, I see.
I'm going to send them this video. No, this isn't a spot. This is how you know it's not sponsored because I'm not getting paid for it. But I'm about to name drop them. So I was introduced to a platform called Dream Data, which is an attribution platform. And the reason this was actually through a client, and I got access to the software, and again being B2B, this really helped tie the picture together because what I could safely say and what I could report on was saying, well, Google, we actually didn't find that many direct conversions via Google ads. And the reason for that is because of this bloody attribution window. So people weren't converting in that 30-day space. However, having this software, it tracks people coming to the website. I don't know how it does it. It tracks who they potentially are. It tracks their name and all of this and the business. And what you could marry up is a picture of they looked at this ad, this campaign 3 months ago. They've come back organically. They've signed up to the email newsletter. They've signed up to the webinar and they've got in touch from that webinar. So what I was able to do is that whilst we haven't directly converted that Google ads, if the Google ads campaign wasn't in there in the first place, they never would have been able to find you and they never would have signed up to the webinar, etc., etc. And I was just like, when we actually went through this with the client and then we could look at reporting, we could say, okay, how many sales are in pipeline that were directly from a Google ad? And actually that picture was then 50 times more potentially. Because I remember the client questioned me, she was like, where have you got this figure from? And then I explained it and they were like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because she was like, that's not what, she wasn't seeing that on her CRM. And the reason for that is because the CRM will do last touch attribution. It's the final thing that they've come from. So Google ads in their eyes, or even people higher up, they were like, it's not working for us because we're not getting any leads in. But actually, if you looked at the 3-month cycle, no, we were. And Google ads tended to be the first touch point. That was a big up to Dream Data. There are other ones out there. I just personally love that one. I do. I don't stop talking about them. I tell you what, if they had like a partnership referral, I'd be rich. I don't,
Yeah, because you do genuinely love it as well.
they are expensive, but they are definitely an investment if you are working in maybe a larger business or something. And it really does help you sort of paint that picture. It paints the picture for you.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's it. I think it's just being mindful of, I think your first step really is to have a look at what that sales cycle looks like for your business. And then from that, you can start to see how attribution can fit into this. Yeah. And just don't get caught up in these people who overinflate metrics. If you're not seeing that on your end, there's something that's not being reported well enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really important point, I think.
Amazing. We didn't actually have any questions this month for this, but I think I did actually pull out one question. Sorry. This is, how do you stop leadership from obsessing over last click only? And this goes down to what they are seeing normally in the CRM, like HubSpot, what that UTM parameter comes in as there. Have you got any ideas, Zoe?
Well, I guess it's education, isn't it? And it's being like honest with how it all works, how you're thinking about your data, and then trying to get on the same line, I guess, on same the same opinion of how data and tracking is going to be managed. Yeah, I mean, last part always looks great for SEO. So
It does. I think I have never not wowed anyone by the attribution paths report in GA4. And not a lot of people know it's there. It's underneath advertising on the GA4 when you go into it. It's not actually in the main dashboard. But have a look at that and show it. And then this then opens up the eyes to anyone who doesn't really understand how many times the brand or website has been touched. This is going to be an eye opener. And then you can start looking at how often it takes someone to convert or how long it takes. And that's going to really help feed into your marketing strategy. That report, I just get it up. No one then everyone stops questioning me. And then what attribution model is best for long? I think I've already touched base on this, long B2B sales cycles. It's definitely either data driven or multiple touch. I think that's just going to really help you. I think if you're using last click, unfortunately, it's not going to give you a true picture of the impact of what your other marketing efforts have had. And I think it's kind of a little bit unfair then to say your SEO team or your email team or whatever that looks like. I don't think it's quite then that fair. So definitely something that's a bit more fairer, data driven or multiple touch. We've touched base on this, but last question, would you track leads that come from word of mouth or referrals?
that's probably going back to like asking, isn't it? And talking to your customers, really. I mean, obviously you can always track, I guess, with like forms or, you can have it like a drop down, that kind of thing. But yeah, is there anything else you could do there?
No, I think that's it. But I think just tracking actually. Yeah, this came from a referral. I spoke to so and so. This works really well in industries such as like construction, more tradesman type things. And I think that in itself is really useful. But again, it's just making a note of them, even if it's on a scrap bit of paper, whatever you want to do, just making a note of where your leads are coming from.
Definitely, it's so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I think, yeah, just to round up then, I think attribution, especially B2B, is messy, but it is doable. I think you can get it about 90% right if you've got all your tracking in place and you're actually reporting correctly and looking at the bigger picture. And then, yeah, aligning back with sales again. We spoke about that a lot on our last podcast, so go and have a listen if you haven't already. And then building that trust between yourselves, your leaders, or your clients, or whatever that may look like for you. Any other recap points, Zoe?
I would say just like, yeah, looking after with SEO, I'll add just that kind of to reiterate what I said before about looking at those keywords and seeing if you've got anything ranking, non-brand, just to kind of like strengthen reporting a little bit and say, this is almost definitely an organic sale that's like a non-brand keyword. It's very difficult to do and it's not perfect, but yeah, I guess that's kind of all we've got in SEO. It's just not as data driven as ads, and that you can't think what keywords exactly it's converted. That you can sometimes dig down a little bit and get a bit closer.
Yeah, I think if your head hasn't been mind blown already by this episode, there's some great articles online. Myself and Zoe talk about this all the time, so feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you have any questions. But yeah, thank you for listening. We look forward to catching you on the next episode, where we are actually going to be talking about how to master SEO and PPC, a small business guide to digital marketing success. I think that's going to be really useful.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Free tools, all of that stuff. That marketing doesn't need to be expensive, especially if you're starting out. But yeah, thank you for joining. Subscribe and follow us on LinkedIn, and keep an eye out for the next month's episode.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Forank Marketing Podcast. We'll be releasing a new episode every month, so don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.